In the heart of rural Texas, there stood a barn people swore was alive. The locals said it breathed, long, hollow sighs that rolled across the fields at night. Parents told their children to stay away. But 5 cousins didn't listen, and they never came home. Decades later, the barn still stands, empty, silent, or so we're told. But when investigators returned, they didn't just find wood and nails. They found something buried, something waiting. The barn is still breathing. August 1979. Crow Hollow Farm sat at the far edge of a county no one ever passed through unless they had reason to. The roads narrowed as they wound into the hills, and the trees crowded close enough that headlights seemed to vanish into them. For generations, the farm had been both pride and curse to the Mallory family. That summer, 5 cousins gathered there for the last time. Their parents, burdened with debts and fragile marriages, had left the children to roam free across the land. The cousins had laughed in the fields, swum in the irrigation pond, and whispered stories about the barn no one was supposed to enter. By the second week of August, they were gone. All 5 of them, aged between 8 and 13, vanished on a Sunday night. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading away. Just the lingering echo of laughter reported by a neighbor who swore she heard them playing near the barn after dark. The sheriff at the time wrote it off as a runaway case. The file grew dusty in a drawer, then disappeared when the sheriff's office moved buildings. The parents scattered, broken under the weight of grief, their marriages collapsing one after another. Crow Hollow Farm was abandoned, its fields taken back by the soil, its fences falling into ruin. But the barn remained. People swore they could hear it inhale on still nights, the boards flexing inward, a sound like lungs drawing breath. Some said the air around it smelled faintly of soil freshly turned, as though the ground itself had been opened. And every so often, a traveler passing by at dusk reported the same thing. 5 children's silhouettes pressed against the windows, and a 6th, smaller, paler, standing apart, watching with eyes no one could quite describe. The farmhouse was nothing more than a husk when Mariah Collins pulled into the drive 40 years later. She killed the engine and sat in silence, the tick of cooling metal loud in the stillness. The gravel beneath her tires had given way to weeds, and the porch sagged under its own weight. Beyond the house, the barn loomed, tall, silent, a carcass of gray wood against the pale sky. Mariah had never set foot here before. She was not a relative of the Mallory children, not by blood. But her channel had grown over the last 2 years into something with teeth. Buried Voices, a true crime series that chased down cold cases no one else would touch. Her subscribers had begged her to cover the Crow Hollow case, and the more she read, the more it lodged under her skin. 5 cousins, gone. Not a shred of evidence. No remains, no belongings, not even a shoe left behind. She had driven 6 hours to stand here because sometimes the only way to understand a case was to breathe the same air where it happened. Mariah reached for her camera, set it on the dashboard, and pressed record. Her reflection filled the viewfinder. Dark hair tied back, shadows under her eyes from too much coffee and too little sleep. "This is Crow Hollow Farm," she said, her voice steady though her hands were not. The last known place of the 5 Mallory cousins. On August 12th, 1979, they vanished. This farm has been abandoned ever since, and locals still call that. She gestured through the windshield at the barn. The barn that breathes. She switched off the camera and slipped it into her bag. The real work wouldn't happen on video. It would happen in notes, interviews, and long nights piecing together fragments the world had forgotten. The air shifted as she stepped out. A low rustle passed through the barn's warped boards, almost like a sigh. She froze. The sound was not the wind. The trees were still. It came again, deeper this time. She told herself it was wood expanding in the heat. Old buildings made noises, But the hair along her arms rose, and for a moment she had the distinct impression that something inside the barn was listening. "Get a grip," she muttered. She started with the farmhouse. The floor groaned beneath her boots, dust puffing up with every step. Wallpaper peeled in strips. A calendar from 1979 still hung in the kitchen, its final page forever on August. She imagined the cousins running through here, 8 feet stomping across the floor, laughter echoing up the stairs. Children who had no idea the world would end for them that summer. Mariah took photos. Details mattered. The kind of details that police reports glossed over. She focused on the staircase, the cracked dishes in the sink, the faded curtains that smelled faintly of mildew and mice. Her notes filled quickly. House abandoned shortly after disappearance. No official records of search inside farmhouse beyond initial sweep. Parents never returned. She checked her phone. The battery blinked low, but there was no signal anyway. Out here, she was on her own. The barn drew her next. Even from a distance, the board seemed to shift in rhythm with her breath. Inhale, exhale. She blinked, and the illusion was gone. But unease coiled low in her stomach. The door resisted when she pulled, its iron latch rusted but still holding. She braced her shoulder and shoved. It gave with a scream of metal, and the smell of soil rolled out, damp, heavy, almost sweet. Inside, the light was dim, slanted through holes in the roof. Dust drifted in beams. The floor was littered with hay, long turned to powder. And yet, handprints marked the inside of the door. Small, dozens of them, pressed into the wood as though children had shoved at it from within. The prints had darkened with age, but the shape was undeniable. Mariah crouched, her throat tightening. She set her camera on the floor and recorded close-ups. The size matched children, 8 to 13, exactly the ages of the Mallory cousins. Her pulse hammered. She reached out, stopping short of touching the prints. They were not carved, not drawn. They were imprints, pressed deep enough to bend the wood grain. Impossible. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She glanced at the screen. No service. But a new message blinked in her inbox anyway. 6 words. No sender ID. Don't trust Reed. He's watching. Mariah's breath caught. She spun, the barn's shadows stretching long around her. No one. Only dust, light, and the echo of her own heartbeat. Still, the board seemed to swell inward, as though the barn itself inhaled, holding her name on its breath. Morning light painted the farmhouse in pale gold when Mariah awoke stiff in the front seat of her car. Sleep had come in fragments, interrupted by the groans of the barn as if it shifted in its dreams. She rubbed her eyes, reached for her notebook, and wrote the message again in bold letters. Don't trust Reed. He's watching. The text had vanished overnight, as though it had never been on her phone, but she could still see it, burned behind her eyelids. Her first stop was the county archives. The building stood on the edge of town, squat and windowless, with a flickering fluorescent light above the door. Inside, it smelled of dust and old paper. A woman behind the desk looked up as Mariah approached, her smile polite but tired. I'm looking for records on the Mallory case, Mariah said. The disappearance of the 5 cousins in 1979. The woman's smile faded. That's a cold one, she said. Not much left. Sheriff's files went missing years ago. Anything at all, Mariah pressed. Newspapers, property records, coroner's reports. The woman hesitated, then nodded toward the back. You'll want microfilm. 3rd cabinet down. But fair warning. Some folks here don't like when outsiders stir up old grief. Mariah thanked her and headed into the dim rows of cabinets. She threaded a reel into the microfilm reader, and the screen glowed to life with headlines from decades past. August 14th, 1979. 5 cousins vanish from Crow Hollow Farm. The article detailed the basics. Names, ages, the time they were last seen. Parents claimed the children had gone to bed together in the farmhouse. By morning, they were gone. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no ransom notes. She skimmed later reports. Theories had ranged from abduction to runaways to a freak accident. Search parties scoured the woods, drained the pond, checked abandoned wells. Nothing. Her eyes snagged on a smaller piece, buried on page 6. Neighbor reports hearing children's laughter near barn. She copied the detail into her notebook. The barn again? Always the barn. Mariah turned another reel. A new headline stopped her cold. Funeral for sixth cousin, held in private. Her pulse quickened. She leaned in. The article was brief, almost evasive. A child named Evan Mallory, age 7, died the previous spring of what was called a respiratory illness. Survived by his mother, no mention of the father. Funeral held at a small church with family only. But Evan's name had never appeared in the official case summary. Only 5 cousins, not 6. She wrote furiously in her notebook. 6th cousin, died months before disappearances? Why excluded from case files? Connection to barn? Looking for ghosts? The voice startled her. A man leaned against the cabinet row, watching her. Mid-50s, denim jacket, grizzled beard. His eyes carried a hardness that made her skin prickle. Just research, Mariah said carefully. He smirked. Plenty of folks come sniffing after that story. Most leave quick. Why's that? Because the barn don't like strangers, he said simply. Then he turned and walked out, boots echoing across the tile. Mariah sat frozen, her notebook open in front of her. She hadn't told anyone she was filming here, yet the man had known exactly what she was after. That afternoon, she drove to the last listed address of one of the Mallory parents. The small house leaned against itself at the edge of town, paint peeling, blinds drawn. She knocked. Silence. She was about to leave when the door cracked open. A woman peered out. Her hair was gray, her face sharp with years of grief. Mrs. Carter? Mariah asked softly. I'm researching the disappearance of the Mallory children. I was hoping to talk with you. The woman's eyes narrowed. People come every few years. Reporters, podcasters, all the same. Why should I speak to you? Because I think there's more to the story than what's in the files, Mariah said. Because I think your daughter deserves the truth. The door opened wider. The woman's hands shook as she gestured Mariah inside. The living room was dim, curtains drawn against the light. A photo of a young girl in braids sat on the mantel, smiling from another lifetime. Jenny was 10, Mrs. Carter said, her voice thin. Bright, stubborn, always climbing trees, and then one night gone. She closed her eyes. They told me she ran away, that maybe the others followed her, but Jenny wouldn't have left me. Mariah listened, taking notes, careful not to push too hard. Did Jenny ever talk about the barn? She asked. Mrs. Carter's gaze snapped to her, sharp as broken glass. They all talked about it, she whispered. Said it breathed, said it was hungry. I told them it was just their imagination, but... Her voice broke. I still hear it sometimes. In my sleep, Mariah's throat tightened. What about Evan? She asked gently. The woman froze. No one talks about Evan, she said finally. He was sick. Died before all that. That's all you need to know. Then why wasn't he listed in the case files? Mrs. Carter's hands gripped the arms of her chair. Because Evan's mother begged them not to. She said he wasn't really gone. Said she saw him in the barn after the funeral. The room seemed to contract around them. Mariah wrote a single line. The 6th cousin may still be there. When she left, dusk was falling. The barn rose on the horizon as she drove back toward the farm, its outline stark against the fading light. She parked by the gate, heart hammering. The air was still, heavy with the scent of soil. She lifted her camera, framing the barn in her lens. Through the cracked boards, for just an instant, she saw them. 5 pale faces pressed against the gaps, eyes hollow, mouths open in silent cries. And behind them, smaller, dimmer, another face. The 6th. When she blinked, they were gone. But the barn sighed, long and low, as if pleased she had finally seen. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and fried potatoes, the kind of place where time had stopped in 1982. Mariah slid into a booth near the window, her notebook already open, recorder tucked in her pocket. She needed to blend in, not as a journalist or filmmaker, but as a passerby who just happened to ask questions. Still, every head in the room had turned when she walked in, then quickly turned back. Outsiders always left ripples in towns like this. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes, poured her a cup of coffee without asking. Passing through? Research, Mariah said. Crow Hollow. The woman's hand stilled on the pot. That place again? Mariah leaned in. Do you remember the Mallory kids? The woman sighed, sat down across from her. Everyone remembers. I was younger then. Had my own little ones. Kept them close after that. She tapped the table with one chipped fingernail. You don't forget 5 children vanishing, especially when some folks say it was 6. 6. Mariah kept her voice casual. Evan, little pale boy, died before the others. Or so they said. Mariah's pulse quickened. And Reed. Do you know that name? The woman frowned. Reed Carowway. Grew up rough, always hanging around the Mallory place. Folks said he had no business there, but the kids liked him, older by a few years. He worked at the junkyard later. Left town for a bit, came back quieter. She lowered her voice. You don't want trouble with Reed. He's not right. The bell over the door jingled. A man walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, denim jacket. The same man Mariah had seen at the archives. Reed. His eyes swept the diner and landed on her. The waitress stiffened. Speak of the devil, she muttered. Mariah forced herself to sip her coffee. Casual. But Reed walked straight to her booth. You're digging deep, he said, his voice low and rough. I'm a journalist, Mariah replied. People want the truth. He leaned closer. She smelled motor oil and smoke. Truth don't live here? Only ghosts. For a heartbeat, she thought he might strike her. But he only straightened and walked to the counter, ordering black coffee to go. The waitress leaned in as he waited. Careful, she whispered. Men like him don't like their shadow stirred. That night, Mariah sat in her car outside the farm, headlights off. The barn loomed in silhouette, ribs of wood glowing faintly in the moonlight. She played back the recording from the diner. Reed's voice filled the car. Truth don't live here. Only ghosts. Her phone buzzed. A new message. No number again. He buried more than cars. Her skin prickled. The junkyard. The waitress had said Reed worked there. She flipped through her notes. Vehicles crushed, stripped, forgotten. A perfect place to hide something. Or someone. Mariah stared at the barn. Her chest rose and fell in rhythm with its shifting boards, as though they breathed together. She forced herself to look away, started the car, and drove toward town. The junkyard sprawled on the edge of San Marcos, rusting carcasses of cars piled high like bones in a grave. A chain-link fence sagged under the weight of weeds. It was midnight, but floodlights hummed, casting pale halos on the gravel. Reed's truck was parked near the office. Mariah killed her engine, heart hammering. She hadn't planned to trespass, but the message burned in her mind. He buried more than cars. She slipped through a gap in the fence. Gravel crunched under her boots. Rows of vehicles stretched into the dark, hoods pried open, windows shattered, metal twisted into grotesque shapes. The air smelled of oil and rust, but beneath it lingered something earthier. Damp soil. She moved deeper, weaving between rows. Her flashlight beam skimmed across license plates, Dented doors, fragments of lives once carried inside these machines. A sound stopped her. Metal shifting. Footsteps? She crouched, breath shallow. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. Then she saw it. A patch of ground recently disturbed, the soil darker, looser. A shovel leaned nearby against a stripped sedan. Mariah knelt, touched the soil, damp, fresh. She snapped photos, heart pounding. Behind her, gravel crunched. She spun, light catching Reed's face just feet away. His expression was unreadable. "Journalist," he said softly. Mariah forced her voice steady. "What's buried here, Reed?" He stepped closer, eyes catching the beam. History, secrets. Same thing. His shadow stretched long across the gravel, merging with the skeletons of cars. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Then tell me," she pressed. "Tell me about the barn, about Evan." Something flickered in his expression. Anger, grief, maybe both. He opened his mouth, but a shout split the night. "Reed!" Another man approached, younger, grease-stained coveralls. "Boss wants you." Reed turned to Mariah, eyes narrowing. "Leave." "Before it swallows you too." Then he walked away, the other man falling in step beside him. Mariah's knees trembled as she backed toward the fence. The barn seemed to breathe inside her chest, even here, miles away. She knew now the case wasn't just unsolved. It was alive, and someone wanted it kept buried. She didn't sleep. At dawn, she sat in her motel room, notes spread across the bed. 5 cousins vanished, 1979. 6th cousin, Evan, died months earlier. Barn described as breathing. Handprints inside door. Reed connected to farm, junkyard, possibly covering something. Fresh soil at junkyard, burial, evidence. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, no number. "Don't go alone tonight. They remember you." Her hands shook as she copied it down. Who was sending these? And who exactly remembered her? She looked in the mirror above the dresser. Her face was pale, eyes shadowed, but the reflection behind her made her freeze. For an instant, 6 children stood in the room, pale, blurred, eyes fixed on her. 5 together, 1 apart. When she spun, the room was empty, but the air carried a faint sound, low and steady, breathing. By morning, Mariah felt the weight of exhaustion pressing behind her eyes. She left the motel anyway, coffee in hand, and drove toward the courthouse. If Reed was tied to the junkyard, there had to be records, employment, business licenses, property ownership. Paper left shadows even when people tried to erase them. Inside the clerk's office, she scrolled through the public database, the screen casting a cold glow in the dim records room. Her search turned up the basics. Harrow's Auto Salvage, established. 1982. Owner, Dean Lom. Lead technician, Reed Carowway. Her pen paused over the name. Reed wasn't just a drifter. He was tied into the fabric of this place. She clicked further. No criminal record, but multiple citations for unsafe conditions on the property. Complaints that never seemed to go anywhere. She closed her laptop and left, but the unease followed. She felt watched, even in the neutral sterility of the courthouse. At noon, she sat across from a retired deputy in a nursing home lounge. He was thin as paper, his skin mapped with age spots, but his eyes were sharp. "You're asking about the Mallory case," he rasped. "Yes. Anything you remember?" His lips twisted. "Plenty I remember. None of it got written down." "Why not?" He leaned closer. His breath smelled faintly of tobacco and peppermint. "Because Sheriff Blaine wanted it buried. 5 missing kids and no answers don't make for re-election. Easier to call it runaways." Mariah's pulse quickened. "Did you believe that?" The deputy shook his head slowly. "Not a chance. I was there. I saw the barn." "What about it?" He swallowed, eyes darting toward the window. "It moved. Mariah frowned. The barn? Boards shifting like ribs. The air inside. It pressed on you like being underwater. I told Blaine. He told me to shut my mouth if I wanted to keep my badge. He coughed, voice dropping lower. But that wasn't the worst part. What was? The sixth boy. Evan. I saw him, weeks after his funeral, standing inside that barn, pale as milk, eyes black as coal, watching us. His hands trembled. He shouldn't have been there. Mariah's skin prickled. Are you sure it was him? The deputy met her gaze, eyes watering. You don't mistake a dead child's face. A nurse appeared, gently guiding him back toward his room. He muttered something as he shuffled away. Mariah strained to catch it. Don't let it breathe on you. Back at Crow Hollow, the field stretched golden under the sinking sun. She parked at the edge of the property, notebook heavy in her hand. The barn rose dark against the horizon, its boards flexing with each gust of wind. She walked slowly, each step crunching through brittle grass. The air cooled as she neared, the smell of soil growing stronger, almost wet. Inside, the dust swirled in lazy motes. Her flashlight beam caught on something new, chalk markings on the floor, half faded with time. Circles, numbers, jagged lines, children's drawings, stick figures with wide mouths. Shapes that could be barns, and always 6 figures. 5 clustered, 1 apart. Mariah crouched, tracing the lines with her fingertips. Her breath fogged in the air, though the night was warm. Then she heard it. A whisper, high and thin, like a child speaking from far away. Mariah. Her body went cold. She swung the light across the rafters, the corners, the door. Empty. Mariah. The voice came again, closer. Her flashlight trembled. Evan? She whispered before she could stop herself. The air shifted. Boards creaked inward, groaning like lungs filling. The barn exhaled, dust swirling around her. And then she saw him. A small boy stood at the far wall, barely visible in the dim light. Hair pale, skin almost translucent. His eyes were wide, dark, impossibly deep. Mariah's throat closed. You're... He lifted a finger to his lips. Shh. Her heart thundered. She forced herself to steady the camera in her hand, filming. What happened to you? She asked softly. The boy tilted his head. His lips moved, but no sound came. Then her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She yanked it out. A message. Again. No number. He took us. Don't let him take you. When she looked up, the boy was gone. Only the handprints on the wall remained, darker now, fresh, as if pressed minutes ago. The barn groaned. The sound wasn't wood this time. It was breath, long and slow, as though the structure inhaled her into its lungs. Mariah stumbled back, camera shaking. The door slammed shut behind her, the latch snapping into place without touch. Her breath came ragged. She clawed at the latch until it gave, spilling her into the night. She collapsed in the grass, chest heaving. Above, the barn loomed, silent now, as if it had never moved. But she knew it had. She had seen the boy, and he had spoken. He had. Hours later, back at the motel, Mariah replayed the footage. Most of it was static, dust motes drifting, the groan of old wood. But in one frame, caught between shadows, was the unmistakable shape of a child's face. Not imagined, not a trick of light. Real. Mariah closed her laptop, her hands trembling. She wrote in her notebook, Evan visible in barn. Barn responds like lungs. Chalk drawings, 6 figures. Phone messages. From him? And then beneath it, if Evan's ghost is still here, what is he warning me about? Who is he? The motel room felt colder, though the heater rattled softly. Shadows lengthened in the corners. Mariah lay awake, listening to her own breath. But underneath it, almost hidden, she heard another rhythm, deep, steady, unnatural. The sound of the barn breathing, even miles away. The junkyard was busier by day, but no less eerie. Rows of cars stood like headstones under a slate-gray sky, the air thick with a tang of oil and rust. Mariah parked outside the chain-link fence and pulled her jacket tighter. Dean Lom, the junkyard's owner, had agreed to speak off the record after she left 3 voicemails. His voice had been wary, his tone resigned. Now he emerged from the office, a heavy-set man in his late 60s with thinning hair and grease-stained hands. His eyes narrowed at her camera bag. "I said no filming." Mariah nodded. "No filming. Just talking." He led her to a corner of the yard where a dented pickup served as a makeshift bench. "You've stirred Reed up," Dean said without preamble. "I'm just asking questions," Mariah replied. Dean snorted. "Around here, that's enough to get you in trouble." He rubbed his palms together as though trying to wash something invisible off. "Reed's been with me near 40 years, knows the yard better than I do. Good worker when he wants to be. But he's strange." "In what way?" Dean hesitated, then lowered his voice. "He talks to cars, says they keep secrets, and he keeps odd hours. I'll come in before dawn, find him already here, dirt under his nails like he's been digging. He says it's scrap work. But I don't ask." Mariah pulled her notebook. "Did you know he spent time at Crow Hollow Farm?" Dean's face darkened. Everyone knew. He was always hanging around those Mallory kids, even though he was older. 16, maybe 17 when they disappeared. Sheriff looked at him, but Reed had an alibi. "Working nights here." "I vouched for him. Were you certain?" Dean's jaw tightened. "As certain as a man can be when his gut says otherwise." The yard hummed with silence. Mariah felt the weight of Dean's words pressing into her notes. "Do you believe he had something to do with the children?" she asked. Dean didn't answer directly. Instead, he stared at the rows of crushed cars. "This place swallows things," he said softly. "Sometimes I think it likes it. Same way that barn does." Mariah leaned forward. "The barn. You've heard it?" Dean's eyes flicked toward hers, uneasy. "Everyone's heard it. Sounds like a man drawing breath after near drowning. But you," he jabbed a finger at her, "you best stop listening. Once you hear it, it follows you." That night, Mariah drove back toward her motel. The highway stretched dark, headlights cutting narrow tunnels of light. Her notes churned in her head. Reed digging. Reed's alibi. The sound that followed. She slowed when she saw the barn in the distance, its silhouette looming against the horizon. She hadn't planned to stop, but her hands turned the wheel anyway. The fields whispered as her car rolled to a halt at the edge of Crow Hollow. The barn stood silent, but the air carried that faint rhythm. Inhale, exhale. Mariah stepped out, gravel crunching underfoot. The world felt thinner here, as though reality frayed at the edges. She lifted her camera, filming the barn's shadow. The viewfinder flickered. Static rippled across the screen. And then, without warning, a child's voice filled her ear. "Don't let him bury me again." Mariah spun, breath ragged. The fields were empty. But when she lowered the camera, Evan stood in the doorway of the barn, pale and still. His lips didn't move, but the words were inside her head. "He put us in the ground. Don't let him do it again." Mariah's throat tightened. "Who, Evan?" "Reed." The boy blinked. His eyes shimmered with something between sorrow and rage. The ground shifted beneath her feet, a subtle tremor, as though the earth itself had exhaled. She staggered back, filming blindly. The barn groaned, its boards flexing inward. Evan raised a hand, pointing toward the far field. Mariah turned. In the tall grass, the earth bulged in uneven mounds, too regular to be natural. Rows, graves. Her breath caught. She sprinted toward them, camera shaking in her grip. The soil was loose in places, darker where moisture still clung. She knelt, fingers digging into the dirt. Her nails scraped something hard. Plastic. She pulled it free, a fragment of faded pink, molded with ridges. A toy comb. Her chest tightened. One of the Mallory girls had been described in reports as obsessed with brushing her doll's hair. The toy was real, tangible, proof. Behind her, the barn exhaled again, louder this time, as though satisfied. She stuffed the comb into her pocket and ran back to her car, heart hammering. Back at the motel, she spread her notes, the toy comb beside them. Her hands shook as she pressed record on her camera. "This," she whispered, voice trembling, "was buried at Crow Hollow." Near the barn. Fresh soil. Someone has been hiding evidence. She stopped the recording, pressing her forehead into her palms. Every lead pointed to Reed. But if he had buried the cousins, why did Evan's ghost linger? Why warn her? Her phone buzzed. Another message. Not just Reed. The barn keeps what it wants. Mariah stared at the screen. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She looked at the toy comb again. Proof of children. Proof of graves. But if the barn itself chose, then what was she really fighting? A man, or something far older, far hungrier? Her reflection in the motel mirror looked pale, eyes wide, and behind her, faint but undeniable, stood Evan. This time she didn't turn. She whispered to the glass, "I'm listening," and his reflection nodded. The toy comb weighed heavy in Mariah's pocket as she pushed through the glass doors of the Austin Police Department. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled of burnt coffee and copier toner. Detective Reyes was younger than she expected. Late 40s, broad-shouldered, with a tired steadiness in his eyes. He listened as she laid her notes, photos, and the comb across the table in a cramped interview room. "I'm not here to sensationalize," she said. "I want truth." This was buried in a field at Crow Hollow. Near fresh soil, Reyes picked up the comb with gloved hands, studying the faded pink plastic. "And you just found this?" Mariah nodded. "Miss Avery," he said carefully, "this case is 40 years cold. We've had hundreds of psychics, reporters, so-called investigators. They all claim evidence. Most of it's nothing." "This isn't nothing," Mariah insisted. "Look at the soil on it. It's fresh." Someone disturbed those graves. Reyes's eyes narrowed. "Graves?" "Yes." Her voice trembled, but she steadied it. 5 mounds. 2 even to be natural. This comb was inside one. Reyes leaned back, crossing his arms. "If what you're saying is true, we'll need a warrant to search the property, and that takes more than a toy comb and a journalist's word." Frustration flared in her chest. "Then listen to what the families have been saying for decades. Listen to your own retired deputy. He saw Evan Mallory after his funeral." Reyes's gaze sharpened. "How do you know about that?" Mariah hesitated. She couldn't say, "A ghost told me." "Not here. Not now." "I've been talking to people," she said instead. Reyes drummed his fingers on the table. "I'll look into it. But I can't promise action on a hunch." Mariah exhaled sharply, gathering her notes. "Then I'll keep digging myself." As she stood, Reyes's voice stopped her. "Miss Avery, Crow Hollow. It's not a safe place. If you're smart, you'll let it rest." His tone was warning, but his eyes carried something else. Fear. Outside, dusk smeared the sky in bruised purples. Mariah drove aimlessly, her reflection fractured in the windshield. At a red light, her phone buzzed. "He's lying." They all are. "Don't trust the badge." She gripped the wheel tighter. The text had no number, no source, just like before. She whispered, "Evan?" The radio crackled, though it was switched off. A child's voice whispered faintly, threaded with static. "Yes." Her breath caught. "Why me?" she asked aloud. Static filled the car, rising, then thinning back into silence. Only 2 words remained, faint as breath. "You listen," That night, Mariah returned to Crow Hollow. She told herself it was for more footage, for evidence the police couldn't ignore. But the truth was simpler. She couldn't stay away. The barn waited, dark ribs etched against the moonlight. The air thickened as she approached, pressing against her chest. Inside, the drawings on the floor seemed sharper, as if renewed. 6 stick figures stared up at her. She crouched, tracing them again. "You wanted me here," she whispered. The boards creaked overhead. Dust spiraled down. And then the door slammed shut. Her flashlight beam darted wildly. A figure stood in the corner, small, pale. Evan. This time his lips did move. "Open it," he whispered. Mariah's voice shook. "Open what?" His eyes darted toward the ground, then back to her. "The barn," he breathed. "It's not just walls. It holds us. Open it, and we can leave." Mariah's pulse thundered. "How?" But the boy's form flickered, fading. His voice lingered, hollow. "Dig." The barn groaned around her, boards flexing inward like lungs. The air pressed heavy, sour with rot. She staggered to the door, wrenching it open, stumbling into the night. Outside, the silence was worse. The stars above looked distant, as though she stood under glass. Her camera blinked low battery. She checked the footage. For one frame, Evan's face filled the screen, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream, then static. Mariah pressed the camera to her chest, her body trembling. She knew now what the boy wanted, what the barn demanded. But if she dug, what would she truly uncover? At dawn, she returned to the junkyard. Dean Lom was already there, leaning against the office, cigarette in hand. "You again," he muttered. "I need to see where Reed digs," Mariah said. Dean's expression hardened. "That's not a good idea. I found evidence at Crow Hollow." "I know he's hiding something here." Dean's cigarette trembled between his fingers. "Reed's not the only one you should be worried about. That barn, it chooses who it lets go. If you've heard it, you're already marked." Mariah stared at him. "Then tell me the truth." Dean's eyes flicked toward the rows of crushed cars. His voice dropped. "Truth is, Reed brings things here, things that don't belong in the ground, and I don't stop him because—" He trailed off, swallowing hard. "Because—" Dean crushed the cigarette under his boot. "Because the barn told him to." The words hung heavy in the morning air. Mariah's chest tightened. She had proof of graves, proof of a ghost, proof of something far worse than a cold case. But now, she understood. She wasn't just investigating Reed. She was wrestling with the will of the barn itself. And the barn was breathing deeper every day. The shovel felt wrong in her hands, like it knew what she planned to do. Mariah had borrowed it from the motel's maintenance shed, promising herself she'd return it before anyone noticed. She drove out to Crow Hollow under a half-moon sky, her headlights dimmed, each mile heavier than the last. The barn rose like a black rib cage against the horizon. The air thickened as she parked at the edge of the field, breath fogging in spite of the warmth. She killed the engine. For a long moment she sat in silence, her hands gripping the wheel. "You want me to dig," she whispered, as if Evan could hear. The radio crackled, though it was still off. A child's voice, soft as a sigh. "Yes." Mariah stepped into the field, the shovel slung over her shoulder. The grass whispered around her legs. Ahead, the mounds waited, uneven, dark, heavy with silence. She stopped at the first. Kneeling, she pressed her hand against the soil. It was damp, cool, recently disturbed. She swallowed, then drove the shovel in. The sound was sickening, metal slicing through earth, roots snapping. She lifted a spadeful, dumped it aside, then another. Time blurred. The rhythm of digging merged with the slow inhale-exhale of the barn. Each thrust of the shovel seemed to sink with its breath. She paused, sweat running cold down her neck, and then the shovel struck something solid. Mariah froze. Heart hammering, she knelt, brushing soil aside with trembling hands. Her fingers touched wood. Splintered, soft with rot. A box. She pulled more dirt away until the lid was clear. It wasn't a coffin. Too small, too crude. Just a wooden crate, nailed shut. Her hands shook as she pried it open with the shovel's edge. The nails groaned, the lid snapping back. Inside, wrapped in rotted fabric, lay bones, small, fragile. A child's. Mariah clamped a hand over her mouth. Her vision swam, bile rising. But she forced herself to look. Around the bones were objects. A doll's shoe, a bracelet made of colored string, a plastic toy car. Grave goods, buried with care or with cruelty. Her breath came ragged. She fumbled for her camera, filming the open crate. The beam of her light trembled, catching on the hollow sockets of a skull no larger than her fist. Behind her, the barn exhaled. Louder now, boards flexing as though in satisfaction. Mariah staggered back, whispering, "Oh God, oh God." The grass shifted. She turned, and Evan stood at the edge of the mound. His pale face glowed faintly in the moonlight. "You found us," he said. Her voice shook. "Us?" He pointed toward the other mounds. Mariah's chest tightened. 5 mounds, 5 children. She whispered, "Evan, why are you outside the ground if they're here?" The boy's expression darkened. His voice dropped lower, filled with something colder. "Because he wouldn't let me rest." The barn groaned, louder, rattling its own boards. Mariah stumbled to her car, fumbling the keys with shaking hands. She threw herself inside, locking the doors, though it was useless against what she'd just seen. Her headlights washed over the field. The mounds looked higher now, earth swelling upward as if something inside shifted. Evan stood in the beams. His lips moved, voice threading into her mind. "Don't stop now. Dig them all, or it will keep breathing." Mariah pressed the accelerator, gravel spitting as she sped away. Back at the motel, she scrubbed her hands raw under hot water, but the smell of soil clung. Her notebook lay open on the desk, words scrawled in frantic handwriting. Crate with bones, toys, doll shoe, bracelet, toy car, 5 mounds total, Evan separate. Barn reacts to digging. She stared at the page, the letters blurring. Her phone buzzed. Another message. "They'll try to bury it again." "Don't let them." Her chest tightened. She whispered, "Reed?" No reply. Instead, the motel lights flickered. The air turned cold. In the mirror above the desk, Evan's reflection stared back, though the room behind her was empty. "You can't trust them," his voice whispered from the glass. "The badge. The junkyard. They all feed the barn." Mariah spun. But the room was empty. Her breath came fast, shallow. She sank into the chair, pressing her face into her hands. She had proof now. Bones, toys, film. Enough to force Reyes to act. But a deeper dread coiled in her stomach. What if Dean was right? What if the barn wasn't just a crime scene, but something alive? Something that used men like Reed as hands, mouths, tools? Her phone buzzed again. "Come back tomorrow. Dig deeper. Bring light." The words chilled her more than the ghost's reflection, because she wasn't sure if they came from Evan or from the barn itself. She didn't sleep. At dawn, she packed her notes, the camera, the toy comb, and the resolve that she couldn't stop. Not now. The sun rose blood orange over the fields as she drove back toward Crow Hollow, the barn waiting, silent but alive. Mariah gripped the wheel tighter, whispering to herself, "One more dig. Just one more." Then the truth. But even as she said it, she knew the barn's lungs were filling, ready to breathe her deeper inside. Mariah didn't go to the police first. She went back to the field. The morning was brittle with frost, the grass stiff and silver. The barn hunched dark against the pale sky, its silhouette warped, as if the structure leaned closer than it had before. Mariah parked at the edge of the dirt track, the shovel rattling in her trunk. Her camera was fully charged, a spare battery packed tight in her coat pocket. She approached the mounds with deliberate steps, her breath pluming in the air. She knelt by the second one. The soil was damp, black. Her hands trembled as she pushed the shovel into the earth. The first strike was always the hardest. After that, it became rhythm. Dig, lift, toss. Dig, lift, toss. Minutes stretched. Sweat prickled at her back despite the cold. Then the shovel scraped wood again. Another box. She pried it open. Inside lay more bones, smaller even than the first. A child's jaw, teeth still intact. Beside it, a pair of cracked glasses with one lens missing. Mariah gasped. One of the Mallory boys had been nearsighted, always teased for his thick lenses. The family had mentioned it in interviews. Her throat closed. She reached for the camera, filming the find, whispering notes into the mic. Second grave, male child, glasses inside, confirms identity. The barn groaned. The sound was deeper now, resonant, like something exhaling from beneath the ground. The boards flexed inward, then outward. A slow heave. Mariah staggered back, the camera shaking. "I'm not doing this for you," she whispered to it. "I'm doing it for them." The grass behind her rustled. She spun. Dean Lom stood there, his broad frame blotting out the horizon. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. "You shouldn't have dug," he said hoarsely. Mariah's chest tightened. "They're here, Dean." The Mallory kids. All of them. You knew Dean's jaw twitched. "I didn't know. I suspected. Reed brought things in, but I never looked too close. The barn feeds, Miss Avery, and when it feeds it leaves scraps." Her voice shook with anger. "Scraps? These are children." Dean's hands balled into fists. "You don't understand. Reed listens to it. Always has. And now you're listening too. I'm not—" But she stopped because she had. Every whisper, every message, every time Evan's pale face appeared. She had listened. Dean stepped closer. "Stop digging. Before it takes you." Mariah lifted the camera like a shield. "If you stop me, I'll go public." Everyone will know. Dean's expression twisted. "That won't save you." The barn groaned again, louder, making the soil tremble beneath their feet. Dean glanced at it with something like fear, then turned and walked away, his boots crunching in the frost. Mariah sank to her knees, the second box still open in the dirt. She whispered, "I won't stop. I'll dig all of you free." And in the shadow of the barn, Evan appeared once more. His eyes glimmered dark. His lips moved, silent at first. Then the sound filled her ears. "Not free," he said. "Unbound." Mariah drove straight to the police station, mud still caked on her jeans, the glasses wrapped in a handkerchief. Detective Reyes met her in the lobby, frowning. "What now?" She dropped the glasses on the counter between them. "Second grave, male child, glasses match the Mallory boy. You can't ignore this anymore." Reyes stared at the cracked frames. His jaw tightened. "I'll get a warrant," he said finally. Mariah exhaled shakily. "Thank you. But you need to stay out of it from here on," Reyes added. "If what you say is true, it's an active crime scene. You're a liability." She wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't dismissing her. He was afraid. "Fine," she lied. That night, the motel felt too small, too fragile. Mariah sat on the bed, camera on her lap. The footage from the second grave played back in jittery frames. Halfway through, the image warped. Static rippled across the screen. For 3 seconds, the footage shifted. The mound disappeared, the barn gone. Instead, the frame showed a dark room, wood-paneled, lit by a single swinging bulb. Children huddled in the corner, eyes wide, lips trembling. Then the screen snapped back to normal. Mariah replayed it. Again, the same. 3 seconds of impossible vision, then back. She pressed pause on the children's faces. Their eyes seemed to look straight at her, pleading. Her breath caught. The barn wasn't just breathing. It was remembering, and it was showing her. Her phone buzzed. Another message. "Third grave, tomorrow. Bring light." She typed back, though she knew it was pointless. "Evan, is it you?" The reply came instantly. "You'll see me." Closer this time, Mariah's hand trembled on the phone. She whispered to the empty room. "If I dig all of you out, will it stop?" The lights flickered once, twice. Then the heater exhaled, loud and long, in the same rhythm as the barn. The third mound waited like a heartbeat in the frost-tipped field. Mariah stood over it in the pre-dawn dark, shovel clenched so tight her knuckles burned. The barn loomed behind her, darker than the sky, its boards groaning in slow, steady rhythm. Inhale, exhale. She dug. Each strike jarred her arms, sent shocks through her bones. The soil was heavier this time, wet, clinging to the blade. Her breath steamed in the cold, clouds dissolving into the barn's invisible lungs. Half an hour passed before the shovel hit wood. She scraped soil aside, pried the lid loose. Inside lay another set of bones, wrapped in tattered cloth. A stuffed rabbit rested against the skull, its button eyes cracked, one ear torn. Mariah filmed with shaking hands. Third grave. Female child. Toy found inside. Her voice trembled but didn't break. Then she froze. Footsteps crunched behind her. She spun. Reed Carowway stood at the edge of the field, broad-shouldered, his work jacket hanging loose. His face was shadowed, but his eyes caught the moonlight, sharp and watchful. "You should have left it buried," he said. Mariah's heart slammed against her ribs. "You did this." Reed stepped closer, boots sinking into the damp earth. "I only did what it told me. The barn." He tilted his head, listening as though to something only he could hear. "It breathes. You know that now. It needed them. And I fed it." Mariah's stomach lurched. "You killed them?" Reed's mouth curved in a slow, almost gentle smile. "No, I didn't have to. The barn takes its own. I just helped it keep what it wanted." Mariah's breath caught. "Evan, he told me." Reed cut her off, voice rising. "Evan wasn't supposed to get away. The barn spat him out. That's why he lingers. That's why he's angry." The barn groaned, boards bowing inward. The sound vibrated through the soil, through Mariah's bones. Reed's eyes flicked to the mound. "Close it," he said. "Cover it back. Or it'll take you too." Mariah raised the shovel between them. "No, I'm finishing this." Reed's face hardened. He lunged, seizing the shovel handle. They struggled, mud flying, their breaths ragged. The shovel wrenched sideways, striking the open crate. Bones spilled onto the ground. The barn roared. Not a groan this time, but a cavernous exhalation that shook the earth. Mariah fell to her knees, clutching her camera. The lens flickered, static swallowing the frame. For an instant, the feed showed not the field, but the inside of the barn. Walls slick with something dark, shapes pressed against them, straining as though to push through. Then it snapped back. Reed staggered, pale, sweat streaking his face. "You've woken it," he gasped. Mariah pushed herself upright, voice shaking. "Then let it breathe all the way." Let it choke on the truth. Reed's eyes widened, fear breaking through his anger. "You don't know what you're unleashing." But Mariah wasn't listening. She turned back to the mound, clawing soil away with bare hands, dragging the bones free. Her fingers bled, nails tearing, but she didn't stop. Behind her, the barn exhaled again, and in the corner of her eye, she saw Evan. Closer this time, his pale face inches from hers. "You're almost there," he whispered. Mariah's vision blurred with tears. "Why me, Evan? Why not your family? Why not Reyes?" The boy's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Because you believe." Reed bolted, sprinting toward the barn. Mariah staggered to her feet, chasing, camera bouncing against her chest. "Reed! Stop!" He reached the door, shoving it open. The barn groaned louder, sucking him inside like a breath. Mariah skidded to the threshold. Inside, Reed stumbled to the center, falling to his knees. His hands clutched his head. "Please," he begged the darkness. "I did what you wanted. I kept them. I kept them all." The air thickened. The walls flexed inward, boards creaking, then outward, as though the barn itself inhaled Reed's words. Mariah stepped inside. The smell hit her. Damp earth, rot, old blood. Her camera light swept across the floor. The drawings were gone. In their place, the wood was slick with something black, pulsing faintly. Reed looked up at her, tears streaking his dirt-stained face. "It's hungry," he whispered. "It's always hungry." Mariah's camera flickered again. The viewfinder showed Evan standing behind Reed, hand on his shoulder. But when she looked up, no one was there. The boy's voice filled her head. "One more breath." Then you'll see, Reed screamed, his body jerking, lifted as though by invisible hands. His back arched, his mouth gaped wide, and from his throat poured a sound. Not a human scream, but a long, ragged inhale. The barn answered with an exhale. Dust and splinters rained down. Mariah stumbled backward, gagging on the stench. Her camera whined, frame glitching between Reed's contorted body and flashes of something else. Children's faces pressed against wood, eyes hollow, mouths open in silent cries. Then Reed collapsed to the floor, limp, chest still rising and falling in rhythm with the barn. Mariah's knees gave out. She crawled toward the door, dragging herself into the night air, gasping. The barn loomed behind her, breathing deeper, faster. And Evan's voice followed her into the dark. "One more grave, then you'll see me." The field was quiet the next morning, too quiet. No birds, no wind, only the creak of the barn in its endless rhythm. Inhale. Exhale. Mariah stood at the edge of the last mound. Her hands were blistered, nails cracked and caked with earth. Her camera hung around her neck, its battery light glowing red. She hadn't slept. She didn't want to. This was it. The fifth grave. The last breath. She shoved the shovel into the soil. The earth resisted, heavier than the others, wet with some dark moisture that clung to the blade. Each strike echoed inside her chest, sinking with the barn's pull. Minutes dragged into hours. Sweat froze on her skin. Then the shovel struck something not wood but metal. She dropped to her knees, clawing at the dirt. Her fingers scraped cold iron. A trunk, rusted, dented, but sealed. Her breath faltered. She dragged it free, coughing as soil crumbled away. The barn exhaled louder, as though anticipating. She fumbled at the latch until it snapped open. The lid groaned upward. Inside, she expected bones. Instead, there were photographs. Hundreds, stacked and curled with age. Children's faces stared up at her. The Mallory cousins, their eyes bright, their smiles captured forever. But not just them. Other children, dozens more. Her stomach turned. She rifled through the stack. Each photo was dated, each name scribbled on the back, all children who had disappeared across Texas, spanning decades. She froze on one photo, a girl with braids, clutching a blue handbag. Her breath caught. Lucia. The barn groaned again, boards flexing. Mariah whispered, "It wasn't just the Mallorys. It's been feeding for years." The ground trembled beneath her knees. She looked up. Evan stood at the far edge of the field. His face was sharper now, more defined, his skin nearly solid in the daylight. "You see now," he said softly. Mariah clutched the photo of Lucia. "Why me?" Why show me this? Evan's dark eyes flicked to the barn. Because you'll open it. You'll give us back the barn's boards bowed inward, then snapped outward with a thunderous groan. The roof shuddered. Dust cascaded like falling ash. Mariah stumbled to her feet, clutching the camera. And if I don't? Evan's face hardened. Then it breathes you in. Behind her, a voice shouted, Mariah! She turned. Detective Reyes sprinted across the field with 2 officers. His gun was drawn, his face pale. Step away from the mound, he yelled. Mariah raised the photo. They're here. All of them. You need to see. The barn roared. The ground split open beneath the mound, soil collapsing inward. The trunk tipped, spilling photos into the chasm. Mariah screamed, diving to grab them. She clutched Lucia's photo as the rest vanished into darkness. Reyes reached her, yanking her back. What the hell are you doing? The earth trembled. The barn exhaled one final time, a gale-force wind that knocked them both to the ground. Mariah's camera flickered. For a moment, the lens showed the barn not as wood and nails, but as something alive. Ribs, lungs, pulsing tissue stretched across a skeletal frame. Faces pressed against its walls from the inside. Children, dozens of them, mouths open in silent screams. Then the image snapped away. Mariah clutched the photo of Lucia to her chest, sobbing. It's all of them, she whispered. The barn took them. Reyes stared at her, at the collapsing soil, at the trembling barn. His face was ashen. We'll excavate, he said, voice hoarse. We'll bring them all out. But even as he spoke, the barn's breathing slowed. The walls sagged, exhalation trailing off like the last breath of something dying. Evan stood in the doorway, watching. His pale face was unreadable. Did I free you? Mariah whispered. The boy tilted his head. Not free. Just awake. Then he dissolved into the air, leaving only the echo of the barn's hollow lungs. They pulled Mariah away, officers swarming the field. Ground-penetrating radar, floodlights, evidence markers. Reyes barked orders, but his eyes never left the barn. Mariah sat wrapped in a blanket at the edge of the field, camera dead in her lap, the photo of Lucia clutched in her hands. The barn loomed silent now, but she knew silence was only another kind of breath. And she wondered, when the digging was done, when the graves were emptied, what would the barn breathe in next? 2 weeks later, the barn was gone. Mariah stood at the edge of the field where Crow Hollow had once loomed. The boards had been pulled down, trucked away to a county landfill. The ground had been excavated, sifted, catalogued. White tents still dotted the property, their flaps snapping in the wind. The official number was 15. 15 children's remains recovered from the soil, along with personal belongings. Shoes, toys, hair ribbons, eyeglasses. 5 confirmed to be the Mallory cousins. The others still undergoing DNA analysis, names waiting to be matched to decades of missing posters. Detective Reyes had spoken at the press conference with a voice that shook despite his practiced calm. We will bring answers to families who have waited too long, he'd said. This is the beginning of justice. But justice felt small compared to what Mariah had seen. She walked slowly across the scarred earth, boots crunching over frozen mud. A cold wind carried the smell of cut wood and turned soil. In her coat pocket, she carried the photo of Lucia, the girl with braids and the blue handbag. She hadn't shown it to Reyes. She hadn't turned it in with the evidence. She couldn't explain why. Maybe because it felt given, not found. She stopped at the place where the last mound had been. The soil was flat now, leveled by excavation, but when she closed her eyes, she could still feel the weight of the shovel in her hands, the pulse of the barn in her chest. Behind her, the wind moved through the grass in a low, steady sigh. For a moment, it sounded like breathing. Mariah opened her eyes quickly. The field was empty. Still, she whispered to the cold air, "Are you here?" No answer, only silence, too complete to be natural. At the motel that night, she uploaded the last of her footage. The files filled her laptop. Shaky video of the graves, the bones, the trunk of photographs. And threaded through it all, the audio, the barn's groaning breaths, the child's whispers, her own voice breaking under fear. She edited carefully, hands trembling. The story needed to be told, but not sensationalized, not made into cheap horror. When the final cut was ready, she stared at the cursor blinking over the title field. She typed, "The Barn That Breathes. The Lost Children of Crow Hollow." Then she hesitated. What if telling the story meant keeping it alive? What if every view, every comment, every whisper of the name gave the barn another breath? Her hands hovered over the keys. The heater in the motel room exhaled suddenly, a long sigh that filled the silence. Mariah froze. Then, slowly, she pressed upload. 3 nights later, the video went viral. News stations picked it up. Families of the missing reached out. Comments flooded in. Disbelief, grief, anger, prayers. Mariah read them until her eyes blurred. One comment stopped her cold. "I grew up near there. My brother vanished in '89. The barn always breathed when we played nearby." Her chest tightened. She scrolled further. "We used to hear it too. My grandfather said never to go near it after dark." The barn was hungry. Mariah closed the laptop, her pulse racing. The heater exhaled again, in rhythm. On her last night in Austin, she dreamed of Evan. He stood in the field, pale against the dark sky, but this time his face was different. Softer, younger, less shadowed. "You gave us back," he said. Mariah's throat ached. "Are you free now?" Evan tilted his head, listening to something beyond her hearing. His expression was unreadable. "Not free," he whispered. "Just waiting." She woke with tears on her cheeks. The motel room silent except for the slow, steady sound of her own breathing. For a moment, she couldn't tell if it was hers or the barn's. The next morning, she checked out, packed her car, started the long drive north. At the first rest stop, she pulled over, unable to resist one last look. She opened her laptop. The video had crossed 5 million views. Mariah shut it quickly, her stomach twisting. On the passenger seat, the photo of Lucia lay face up. The girl's eyes seemed to follow her. Mariah whispered, "I won't forget." The wind rustled the trees outside. For just an instant, it sounded like a child's sigh. Mariah gripped the wheel, heart pounding. Then she drove on, the road stretching ahead, the weight of the barn following behind like a breath that would never end.